You're probably tired of hunting for a saw that just works, something that stays in place, gives you a clean cut every time, and won't make you nervous every time you pull the trigger. You want a tool that feels solid enough to rely on day after day, easy enough to set up so you don't waste time fighting adjustments, and worth the price you're about to spend. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When you walk into a woodworking shop and see a cabinet saw, the first thing you notice is the promise of precision. But that promise can feel shaky if you've ever bought a budget cabinet saw that wobbles, or a standalone table saw that takes up half the shop and still can't keep the blade from kicking back. The risk of buying the wrong thing isn't just about spending money, it's about putting your fingers, your projects, and your schedule at risk. That's why the safety system and the fence design matter more than the horsepower rating on the spec sheet. The SAWSTOP 10-inch professional cabinet saw is aimed squarely at woodworkers who need a combination of safety, repeatable accuracy, and a little extra muscle for tougher cuts. It's a 1.75 horsepower motor paired with a 36-inch TGlide fence, which means you can set up long rip cuts without worrying about the fence drifting. The patented safety system is the real differentiator. If the blade contacts flesh, a sensor detects the change in conductivity and a brake stops the blade within milliseconds, dropping it below the table. In a shop where apprentices are learning and you're juggling multiple projects, that kind of failsafe can be the difference between a close call and a trip to the ER. Let's talk about the day-to-day experience. You roll the saw out of its cabinet, lock the motor in place, and pull the plug into a dedicated outlet. The TGlide fence slides on a smooth aluminum rail, and you can lock it down with a simple lever. Because it's a full-size 36-inch fence, you can set up cuts on 26 stock without having to measure twice and adjust the fence a dozen times. When you make a rip on a piece of pine, the blade stays centered and you get a clean, square edge that takes little or no sanding. That's the sort of repeatable result you need when you're building cabinets or framing a deck and you can't afford to waste material. Dust collection is another part of the practical picture. The saw comes with a built-in port that threads directly to a shop vacuum. When you run a long cut, the dust doesn't just billow across the bench, it gets sucked away through the port, keeping the work area cleaner and reducing the health hazards that come from fine wood particles. I've seen hobbyists try to retrofit a cheap cabinet saw with a hose and end up with a lot of leaks and a noisy vacuum. The SAWSTOP design makes the connection straightforward, so you spend less time fiddling with duct tape. Now for the hidden trade-offs. The unit is definitely a full-size cabinet saw, which means it takes up a good chunk of floor space. If you're operating out of a small garage, you'll need to carve out at least a 6-foot square for the cabinet, the dust collector, and clearance behind the blade for the safety brake to retract. That's a commitment many casual DIYers overlook until the box arrives and the assembly takes half a day. The weight is also a factor. At roughly 300 pounds, it's not something you can push around on a whim. You'll likely want a permanent spot or a rolling base designed for heavy equipment. Cost is the next practical consideration. The SAWSTOP line sits in the premium tier of cabinet saws, and the price reflects the safety system and the heavy-duty fence. If you're a weekend woodworker who only makes a few small projects a year, that expense might feel unjustified, especially when there are safer table saw options with lower price points. However, if you run a small business, teach classes, or just want to protect your family's hands while you work, the safety feature pays for itself by removing the anxiety that often slows people down. Who should hit the buy button? If you already have a dedicated shop space, need a reliable tool for repetitive cuts, and value the peace of mind that comes from a blade's top system, this saw checks all the boxes. It's also a smart pick for anyone who's been burned literally or figuratively by a careless cut on a less safe saw. The 36-inch fence makes it a workhorse for larger stock, and the dust collection integration keeps the environment cleaner, which matters if you spend many hours in the shop. Who should walk away? If your projects are limited to occasional trim work, a small-scale DIY shop, or you're tight on floor space, a benchtop table saw with a decent blade guard might serve you better. Also, if you're on a strict budget and can't justify the premium price, you'll find respectable alternatives that lack